The topic is going to be Dyson Dots, a longer view, and this is presented by Robert Kennedy from Oak Ridge. And Robert has been working on this idea that for quite a while and has presented it extensively. Robert is a senior systems engineer doing green energy work in Oak Ridge at the local, national, and regional levels. He had an interesting trip where he presented this in Russia, and I think he'll probably relate just a little bit of that.
So I propose to you that the reason that I'm talking to you about Dyson Dots at the Interstellar workshop, the value proposition, is that Dyson Dots, which are photovoltaic light sails used for the purposes of geoengineering, that Dyson Dots are the killer application, you remember the killer application, to bootstrap us ad Astra, which is why you should care. This is what a Dyson Dot is. This is the view from here. It's a sunshade between the sun and the earth, stopping a little bit of light from hitting the earth. And on the sunny side of the dot is a field of PV. And if you're looking at this and freaking out about the size, don't, these are exaggerated so you can see how the system goes together. But these are actually the scale. The 6-petal thing is the Dyson Dot, and the little round thing is the microwave, is the maser relay. Nevertheless, still the size of a country. And even the photovoltaic field is the size of a small country or an American state. The location is not at the Sun-Earth L1 point, but a few 100,000 kilometers to the sunny side of that point. Nevertheless, it's only 1% of the way to the sun, so it's basically in our neighborhood, 4 times as far as the moon. Okay. Why is it the killer app? Why should you care? Well, currently, our access to space, in terms of capacity, is completely inadequate to do anything large and important. Not to disrespect the people in the Apollo program, I'm going to use that word again, but it's completely unsuitable in terms of scale to what we need, right? And if we applied the costs that exist today, and I cut these in half last night because Les complained that my figure was 10 times too high, or twice too high, 10 grand a kilogram. It's still, to do anything really important on a planetary scale, just to get into LEO, which Harry Stein calls halfway to anywhere, would beggar the planet. Sheer mass. The Dyson Dot's 300 million tons in order to do its job, okay? Lifting that into LEO would take a century of planetary income, a century of all goods and services by all human beings, man, women, and child on planet Earth for 100 years with the technology we have now. So the scales of what needs to be done and the existing costs of getting where we need to go are just completely unmatched to the challenge. Therefore, if you're gonna solve this is the only hand waving, if you're gonna solve the climate change problem with geoengineering, you will necessarily develop techniques, I'm not exactly sure which, but those techniques will bootstrap the human race ad Astra, which is what y'all want. Now, when you develop those techniques, they're gonna have interesting side effects, Sam. Political side effects. This talk, don't want to disappoint you all, but it is more about politics and engineering, and the lunch plenary coming next, the BOFs tonight, and the lunch plenary tomorrow are about dealing with politics and doing practical things to move us forward, okay? So I'm just telegraphing you. We are a bunch of geeks, and we have a new geek master right there, okay? But there are, give him a round, there are other constituencies, potential allies. If you all want to get to the stars, you need to reach out, you need to be adult, politically adult, reach out, make alliances, coalitions, and use them, all right? Because otherwise, how the hell are we going to get to the stars in a carbon-constrained future. You know, getting to Alpha Centauri requires astronomical amounts of mass and energy, and it's just not going to happen with the resources we have to hand. This is something people like you, futurists, pro-spacers, are worried about. They're also worried about, I know a lot of y'all, given climate change and military challenges that come along with that, how are we going to preserve our quality of life? This Renaissance civilization, which is basically only 500 years old, but that we've all come to love, you know, and quality of life means abundance, okay? Scarcity, doing without, abstinence, that's not quality of life. And a long-term good quality of life that human beings want is not based on abstinence or self-abnegation. You know, we just ain't that good. Here's an ally that maybe y'all haven't thought of, tree huggers, okay? Now, tree huggers are very concerned about the environment, also quality of life from an environmental perspective, being able to live in a natural world, right? And being able to go out into the wilderness once in a while. You know, the trouble with climate change is it's happening faster and faster, and right now it looks like our human institutions are not reacting fast enough to deal with it appropriately. And as I already said, if there's not enough money for time, money, and energy for interstellar travel, there's not enough for climate change. And number three, for this, something the space-based audience will understand, we've got too many eggs in this basket. Tsiolkovsky said that, Heinlein said that, it's true. There is a reason that the bottom of that slide is in Russian, but I'll tell you that offline. And why I cite Lenin. Okay, another ally. Okay, we've got futurists, pro-spacers, tree huggers, patriots. Now, patriots are worried about security, especially the security that's related to energy, which is what I do. That's my day job. Okay? There are a number of externalities in the way we obtain energy in our current unsustainable manner, which means getting it from a place we don't control, in a place and manner we don't control. There's national security externalities. I won't go through the math, but I will just say to you, if you priced gasoline that made those externalities real, you know, the cost of being overseas, all the externalities we pay for in the national security, it'd add $1 a gallon to the price of gas. Now, $1 a gallon won't kill you, but you will notice. It's an extra portrait of Andrew Jackson every time you fill up your tank. Energy security. Energy security means, do I know where my energy is coming from? Not necessarily whether it's cheap or not, but can I rely that it's going to come from there? Don't worry about energy independence. That's just a mirage. If you've got energy security, you're good to go. And there's people worried about balance of trade, you know, sending too much money overseas, especially to unfriendly countries. Now, natural gas is changing that very fast, but nevertheless, these are the kinds of things patriots worry about. Here's another value proposition. Space-based photovoltaics, which is something I need to solve the climate change problem, also addresses some important national security, energy security, and balance of trade problems, right? Because of all the PV on the sunny side. The thing is, in order to build the Dyson dot I want to take care of a problem that concerns me, climate change, the solar sail and the PV together are going to be 150 megatons, 150 million tons in mass out there. That's our, not our first cut, that's our second cut. And Les will be familiar with this. Last year, when I gave this, or a year and a half ago, when I gave this talk in Aosta, my mass budget was 30 million tons, and now it's 300 million. You guys, you know about growth and creep. This isn't creep, this is explosive growth. Okay. So 300 megatons, we are not going to lift 300 megatons into low Earth orbit. Oh, I forgot. The other 150 megatons is the maser relays, okay? So 150 megatons in the sail, 150 megatons in the maser relays. That's what's required to get the electricity that the dot makes to Earth. We're not going to lift 300 million tons off the surface of the Earth. We are going to need a program of exploiting this solar system. We're going to have to use off-world resources. Unless somebody invents anti-gravity, we're going to have to go off-world for the resources, which means developing and executing a program of detection, right? And detection is important to the planetary defense people. Claudio, there's a workshop in April about that. Characterization. Also, the planetary defense people care about that. Prospecting. You've heard of planetary resources, and we now have a new startup, Deep Space Industries, who's interested in this. Capture and retrieval techniques. And finally, extraction. Now, like I said, lifting 300 million tons into low Earth orbit would cost all planetary income for a century. That's $6,000 trillion. I'm pretty sure the bullet number 2 would cost less than that. And bullet number 2 would pay for itself, because these lower items are actually economically valuable activities and generate revenue, right? As technologists, the interesting thing about extraction, in the field of chemical engineering in space, there's basically no state-of-the-art. To a first order, no work has been done on chemical engineering in zero gravity in fairly high vacuum, which means, you know the great thing about a field in which no work has been done? Y'all can be famous. It's easy to succeed. You'll have your name on a high school, 50 years after that. So if you're ambitious, that's reason enough right there to get into the field.
You only get your name on a high school if you die.
What?
We can change that.
There's other speakers here who have ideas about that. The point I'm making is the science community, which maybe is thinking of pure science and astronomy is pure and we should only, use space for research, and they think that their science culture is divorced from the getting-rich-quick culture. I'm here to tell you, they're not divorced. They're in fact, not only are they complementary cultures, both together will create mutually reinforcing techniques and technologies that the other one needs. That's in the electronics world, David, that's called heterodyning, right? So they're not exclusive at all. All right, back to the climate change thing. This is a chart from the IPCC report that shows red is bad, red is getting hot, and cool is getting cool. And these are the effects of various kinds of things in our world. So the one at the top, that's the effect of greenhouse gas. And the effect of greenhouse gas is to basically effectively add a few watts to what the sun is shining down on us. And it adds, those few watts grow, and it's sort of like compound interest, okay? On the cool side, this debate goes on all the time, clouds. Well, clouds reflect sunlight. So if you have more clouds caused by more water being evaporated, then there'll be a cooling effect that will partially offset the warming effect. So there's all these different effects, some of them man-made, some of them natural, but together, the way we're living our lives right now, they add about 1.5 watts per square meter of extra energy into the system. Now, there's a fairly significant error bar on that, but, so it's from, say, 2/3 of a watt to 2.5 watts. Let me put that 2 watts in perspective. This arrow, if we drew it to scale, this is the amount of sunlight that actually comes down at Earth orbit onto us, okay? It's 1,365 watts per square meter, which the end of that arrow would be out across the industrial park at the far side of that field, if it were to scale. So you're probably thinking, well, then these little blocks ain't that important. But these little blocks work like compound interest. And the Earth is actually a very finely, it's a sensitive and balanced system. At the top there, I've circled in the greenhouse gas part that about 1/3 of that block comes from burning coal to make electricity. Now I'm going to show you the schematic of the Dyson dot and how it solves problems. So there it is between the Earth and the sun. You'll notice that dark shadow comes off and fades out to a point, right? And the dark part of the shadow doesn't get to the Earth. You know, when you cast a shadow, you have dark shadow and light shadow. The light shadow gets to us, and it's very, very light. It's only 1 part in 400. You wouldn't even feel it on your skin. So the dot shades us. And I won't tell you why, because I don't have the time. 3 degrees Fahrenheit the dot is sized to produce 3 degrees Fahrenheit cooling, but we happen to know from the historical record that 3 degrees Fahrenheit cooling caused the Little Ice Age in Europe a few centuries ago. So that's what our dot is sized to do, which is why one nickname is a mirrored Maunder minimum, which is what astronomers call it. We call it the Little Ice Age, right? To offset the opposite warming we expect. At the top, the photovoltaics on the sunny side of the dot, the side you can't see right now, are generating electricity, which goes into a multi-terawatt phased array maser, bank shot to the Earth, and downloaded to interface with a circular grid, a circumpolar grid, around the Arctic Ocean. This is not my idea. In fact, all of the pieces of this are anywhere from 40 to over 100 years old, right? Mirrors in space have been known for over 100 years. Buckminster Fuller thought up this one in 1939 or 1940. It's called the Dymaxion grid, right? And he did not have space in mind, but he knew a grid around the Arctic Ocean would connect all the power networks on Earth. So you have the bank shot to the grid, and then you can feed everything on Earth. And that patch of photovoltaic, that's the size of a small country, that is enough to provide all the electricity that we think the Earth will need at current rates of growth, which are pretty high, on the order of 10 terawatts of electricity by the year 2050. That's the basic dot concept. And so, putting the dot into the IPCC diagram, okay, remember, see the little gray block on top? That's coal. Well, that right there is the amount of PV on the dot, and the PV, basically, because PV electricity is coming in, you get to turn off your carbon burner. So the PV is acting like anti-carbon. So that PV makes that gray block of coal go away. And unlike many solutions that are international solutions that are proposed, this one actually pays for itself. That's the whole point. We originally put the PV on there as a revenue generating mechanism just to pay for the project, but it's got other benefits too. Next, most of the benefit is the shading, which that's the shading effect in scale of these other natural and man-made effects. Now, it may well be by the time the human race gets to the point where we can build that, we're putting orbital power, we're putting power in orbit, just by displacing that, we'll start making the climate change better. So we may not need a sunshade the size of a country. Right now we do, but as we make progress, we may not. So the point is that the dot generates revenue, and the dot manipulates large amounts of energy. If you want to go to Alpha Centauri, you're going to need lots and lots of energy, and you ain't going to get it down here. So if you want to go to Alpha Centauri, you should dedicate your careers to getting involved in something that makes us all rich. And using a Dyson dot for geoengineering is maybe the best near-term way to do that, because ultimately it will make everybody rich. And this appeals to futurists, to pro-spacers, to tree huggers, to patriots. There's something for everyone to like. You get all those people under a tent, there ain't too many outside of it. And don't worry about politics, okay? Politics ain't evil. Politics is how human beings solve problems, resolve conflict without violence. Politics is not evil. Politics is good. Clausewitz said war is the extension of politics. Everybody knows that part. But the part nobody ever remembers to say, and to politics it must return. In other words, when the war's over, you go back. So you guys got to, not you guys, me too, you got to engage different allies to get what you want. I've already covered the technically sweet synergies. So there she is again. I'm done.
Let's say that you could put that up right now with the technologies that we have. Would the embodied carbon in the design be worth the savings from the PV once it was up?
There's practically no embodied carbon in the design if I am...
Using transportation, using trucks...
embedded energy.
Yes.
Drop in the bucket. Best comparison, PV panel on your roof, the embedded energy in it, you pay it off in 2 years. The industry guarantee is 25 years. It might actually last 100. So the embedded energy in this nice new energy product is a drop in the bucket.
There's another aspect to this that we'll get to more at lunch. But
Yeah.
part of the way to make that thing is to build earth-based PV first. So some of your energy that's embodied is solar energy from the get-go. So you have a pretty high leverage in energy investment and energy return quotient with this kind of project.
Yeah, let's get to Stephen.
Who controls the targeting of the 20 terawatt orbital laser?
Actually, it's worse than that. There's 40 terawatts of sunlight hitting the PV, which I assume 40 watts in the first link, 40 terawatts in the first link, but I'm assuming the first link is only 50% efficient. I'm being too hard. So I'm going to say where I do have an answer.
Yeah, so who's going to target it for the next generation?
Okay, you're all going to hate this, but just deal with it. The international community. Do you think the powers that be, I don't want to offend you all, but do you think the powers that be are going to let some libertarian just steer a terawatt anywhere he wants to?
Anybody steer it is the problem.
Well, no, people are capable of doing great things, but they got to get together. You have to address that people with security concerns, people with fears, that they have a legitimate point of view, and you can't just disrespect them out of hand. That's why I said that talks about politics. Sir, and back.
Say that the dot was up in the sky now, and it does produce a shadow, correct?
Yes.
The green community is quite fond of their wonderful, what is the word? Oh.
I think you're about to ask me that. It's totally reversible. So let's say it works a little too well and things start cooling down a bit too much. You move it out of the way so the full sunlight comes through. But guess what? It's still making energy, so you're still making money. Stephanie.
What I was going to ask, being an astronomer, is the solar effects, and you just answered one of them, which is what if the sun goes back into an extended minimum? The other one is, you've got basically a really big solar sail out there, really, and what happens if we get broadsided with a coronal mass ejection event?
Good question. I will tell you that the regular solar wind, the part that's made out of matter compared to light, is 1,000 times smaller in force.
Yeah,
Solar wind on average.